Hello, my name is Ryan LeVake with the City of Tempe. Today I'll be discussing accessory dwelling units and the draft ordinance for the City of Tempe. Today we'll go over a presentation about the objective, overview of the public input and research, draft ADU ordinance overview, and then the next steps and timeline for the process for hearings for adoption. The objective of this proposed text amendment is to meet the requirements of House Bill 2720, which mandates cities over 75,000 population to adopt ADU regulations no later than January 1 of 2025. This also helps us meet the objective of providing affordable housing options, extra income opportunities for homeowners, and facilitates our multi-generational living needs. This also closely aligns to certain city council priorities, specifically Performance Measure 2.15, feeling invited to participate in city decisions, Performance Measure 3.28, ending homelessness, Performance Measure 3.30, age-friendly community designation, and Performance Measure 4.09, achieving a housing inventory ratio. When we first started this process for accessory dwelling units, we did some public outreach research in a couple different sessions, starting way back in October of 2023. A little overview of what we heard in those sessions. We had public meetings at the Temporary Library, online Zoom meetings, and a public survey of over 200 responses. We also met with the Neighborhood Advisory Commission, City Council work study sessions, and even held a breakfast with Burdetta. The second round of the process, after hearing the first input, City Council recommends doing a second round of outreach and further extensive information. We also went to the public meeting library to discuss more topics, another public Zoom meeting, and then a second public survey, which received 619 responses. We had some additional public meetings both in North Tempe and South Tempe, and as well met with our Neighborhood Advisory Commission. During the second round of the process, we also met with the Development Review Commission, Transportation Commission, Historic Preservation, Sustainability and Resilience Commission, the Broadmoor Neighborhood Association, Mayor's Youth Advisory Commission, and finally, City Council study session. We also conducted some early on research about the idea of pre-approved ADU plans. And we met with other cities, discussed their approach and how to gather input and support for creating an expedited or reducing the costs involved with getting permits for ADUs. We looked and evaluated pre-approved architectural plans and how to shorten up the permitting process, where some cities developed a website where they can purchase a private design firm and allow residents or applicants to pay for those plans, and the costs range from $500 to up to $1,200. These pre-approvals were for building code only. There is still a requirement process to apply for and submit a site plan application and meet other requirements such as setbacks, lot coverage, etc. We are still currently conducting additional research on this topic, and we hope to bring something in the future forward that will help expedite these processes. Now, a little overview of our draft accessory dwelling unit ordinance. What city is looking at adopting looks to make sure we meet the needs of House Bill 2720. Many of the details in the ordinance the city was considering during a public outreach are now dictated by state law. That includes the ADU size requirement, whether or not cities can regulate for parking, and certain limitations or restrictions on short-term rentals. Impact on HOAs. A lot of questions come up about whether or not state law regulates or requires HOAs from complying with House Bill 2720. It does not impact neighborhoods with CC&Rs that can be more restrictive or have greater regulations for ADUs. For example, CC&Rs can control and review design review, or whether ADUs are outright restricted within a community. So please, it's important to check with your HOA regarding regulations for ADUs on whether not they are allowed, or have certain restrictions or limitations in your area, which were key topics also in the public outreach effort. State requirements now include, as part of our draft ordinance that we are presenting today, we must allow at least one attached and one detached accessory dwelling unit where single-family dwellings are permitted use. So that includes both multifamily, single-family, and even recreational mobile home vehicle zoning districts that allow a single-family dwelling. We must also allow the attached and detached accessory dwelling unit. So a total of 2 ADUs. There's also a third ADU allowed on lots 1 acre size or more as a restricted affordable unit. And that is restricted affordable unit. We'll get into a little bit more details, but that limits identifying a household of earning 80% or less of area median income. That all ADUs are a maximum 1,000 square feet in livable area, or no more than 75% of the gross floor area of the existing single-family dwelling, whichever is less. Below there, you see an example image where you see an example of a detached ADU and then an example of an attached ADU that might be part of the existing residence. And then that third ADU, which are for 1 acre lots, that comes with a restricted affordable component. Based on those state requirements, we were also looked in the city to find out, where we have 1 acre or larger lots. There's a total of 233 parcels throughout Tempe that qualify as single family or multifamily zoning that would allow a third ADU. We've got about 16 properties that are located north of the 60 and about 217 properties south of the 60 that have that ability to request a third ADU lot. Now, municipalities have some additional restrictions identified in the state law. Those consist of prohibiting use of an ADU as a short-term rental. We cannot restrict ADUs from being rented or short-term rented. We cannot require a verifying familial status of pre-existing relationship between the occupants of an ADU or main dwelling. These are all intended to be rental units, and the rental units may not have a family relationship with the other rental units. We cannot require additional parking or fees to waive any additional parking requirements. The property owner may choose to add parking, but it's not a requirement of the city. We cannot require the ADU to match the design of the building or the main residence. We cannot require roof pitch design or materials that may match the single family dwelling. Design review is not a requirement of the process. It's up to the applicant on what they bring forward. And we also cannot require improvements to public streets as a condition to allow ADUs, which also includes public alley improvements as well. Some other restrictions the city may not do is we may not set restrictions that are more restrictive than those for single-family dwellings with regard to height, setbacks, lot size, coverage, or building frontage. We also can't set a rear or side yard setback that it's more than 5 feet from the property line. So if your zoning district has a greater setback than 5 feet, then the 5-foot setback applies for the accessory dwelling unit. And we also cannot require or restrict covenants concerning ADUs. The Tempe requirements, other draft requirement regulations that are being proposed for this draft. If you have an existing ADU and you're in a multifamily zoning district, you need to comply with the maximum allowable livable area. If you increase that size beyond, then we have to treat the property as if it were a multifamily development in terms of an apartment complex, so to speak. So those come with additional design review standards and multifamily standards that don't apply to accessory dwelling units. So make sure you comply with those size requirements for the ADU. If construction ADU removes required parking that is primary parking required for the main residence. That parking does need to be replaced. That's not the ADU parking. That is the required parking for the primary residence or the single family dwelling on the lot. So that parking must be accommodated. ADUs are proposing no more than 2 bedrooms per ADU. Unique addressing will be needed to be provided visible to the public rights of way so that either guests of the ADU residents or calls for public service like fire or police needs need to be able to address and identify the location for the address. If the access to the ADU is provided through the side of the property, then we'll need to grant access by means of an easement for emergency purposes. The Tempe requirements also include residential requirements for connections to sewer, water, utilities in conformance with the standards of the city. The ADU shall provide basically a whole living environment of sleeping, sanitation facilities, which include a shower tub, toilet, and sink, and include cooking facilities. There are considerations for alternative construction types, as long as the allowed structure is on a permanent foundation and complies with the building code requirements adopted by the city of Tempe. We're also removing the section for guest quarters, which are typically identified as similar to ADUs, but are only intended to occupy guests of the main residence of the house. You can still have guest quarters. They'll just be allowed under the accessory dwelling unit provisions that are provided today or proposed in the draft. So if you have an existing guest quarters on the properties, that guest quarters may remain and it's still allowed pursuant to the non-conforming use standards of the code. Guest quarters may also be converted into an ADU if the intent is to rent that guest quarters to a person or household. Then that ADU must receive proper permits to then meet and comply with the regulations adopted for the ADU code. Basically, you would come in, apply for permits to convert the guest quarters to ADU, and then the ADU will need to identify to meet the standards required for that unit rental purpose. Next steps in our public hearing process, we have more information about this. If you go to tempe.gov/ADU, there is a review and a copy of our draft ordinance available. Provide comments. We'll also be taking comments through our public hearing process. The first meeting we'll have is a Development Review Commission hearing, which is a recommendation hearing by this commission. We'll take public testimony or input on the draft ordinance, as well as receive a recommendation from the Development Review Commission on August 27th. From that recommendation is required then 2 city council hearings. The first city council hearing, which is just an introduction for the ordinance, is scheduled for October 1st. It's on a Tuesday. And then the second and final hearing is on November 21st, and there'll be action for that request at that time. Ordinances are typically in effect within 30 days after the final decision of the hearing, and that will be on December 21st, which means the first opportunity or eligibility to apply for building permits for accessory dwelling units. I'd like to thank the staff involved in this effort, and you can reach us out for any questions or inquiries about this process or ADUs. My name is Ryan LeVake again. There's my phone number there. Thanking Ambika Adhikari, Lucas Jensen, Shauna Warner, and Brenda Clark for their help on this process. Thank you very much.